You know, what President Kennedy said those words, a definite threat to peace, he wasn't talking about some far-off possibility. He was describing right then, the razor's edge. Because for 13 days, humanity had built the perfect tools for its own destruction. And the people in charge, well, they had their fingers right on the button.
13 days. That's how long we had. For 13 days in October of 1962, the entire world stared straight into the abyss. We're going to dive into the Cuban Missile Crisis, the absolute closest we have ever come to wiping ourselves off the map. It was the final countdown, and the clock was ticking.
So, how did it all start? Well, it began with a secret. The Cold War was in full swing, right? The US and the Soviet Union were in this massive global standoff. But in the fall of '62, that whole dangerous game was about to get a brand new stage, and this one was terrifyingly close to home.
Okay, so picture this. It's October 14th. An American U-2 spy plane is flying way, way up over Cuba. It takes these grainy pictures, and when the analysts look at them, their blood runs cold. The photos are crystal clear in their meaning. The Soviet Union was building nuclear missile sites right there, in Cuba. And just like that, the fuse was lit on what would become the most dangerous moment in all of human history.
90 miles. That's it. Let that sink in. 90 miles is nothing. It's the distance from Cuba to the coast of Florida. Suddenly, Soviet nukes weren't thousands of miles away across an ocean. Nope, they were right there, on the doorstep. You know what that means? The warning time, it went from maybe 30 minutes to less than 5. 5 minutes to react to the end of the world.
And the threat itself, it was just chilling. The intel briefings Kennedy got were horrifying. We're talking medium-range missiles that could turn Washington, D.C. into a crater. And the bigger ones, they could reach all the way from Canada down to Peru. For the very first time, if you lived anywhere in the Western Hemisphere, you were a target, plain and simple.
So what do? I mean, think about it. Kennedy and his team, they had no good options. Zero. An airstrike, that could trigger an instant nuclear war. An invasion, a bloodbath, probably leading to the same thing. And doing nothing, that was just not an option. So he had to make a move. He decided to draw a line, not in the sand, but right in the middle of the ocean.
And his first move? Honestly, it was a genius bit of wordplay. He didn't call it a blockade. No, he called it a quarantine. Now, why does that matter? Well, a blockade is legally an act of war. A quarantine, that was kind of a gray area. It was a move designed to show strength without immediately starting World War III. Of course, the Soviet premier, Khrushchev, he saw right through it. He called it what it was, an act of aggression. And the high-stakes chess match, it was on.
So you have this line in the water. You have US Navy ships enforcing it, and you have Soviet ships steaming right for it. The whole world just held its breath. The two biggest superpowers on Earth were on a collision course, and every single second counted.
And look, this wasn't just some abstract thing happening in Washington and Moscow. This was real. This was personal. For everybody, all around the world. People thought this was it. Kids were doing duck and cover drills under their school desks. Families were literally building fallout shelters in their backyards. Every time you turned on the radio, you braced yourself, because you thought this might be the broadcast that announces the end.
And then, it got worse. The military went to DEFCON 2. Let me be clear. This has only happened once in American history. It is the step right before all-out nuclear war. This wasn't a drill. This meant nuclear-armed bombers were in the air 24/7, just circling, waiting for the order to fly to their targets in the Soviet Union. We were that close.
All this tension, it had to break. And it did, on one single day. Saturday, October 27th. They call it Black Saturday for a reason. This was the day. The day the world came so close to Armageddon you could feel the heat. And, unbelievably, it might have been the day one man, hidden deep under the ocean, saved every single one of us.
The day was just a total nightmare, a cascade of things going wrong. First, in the morning, a U-2 spy plane gets shot down over Cuba. The pilot is killed. Kennedy's generals are screaming at him to retaliate, to strike back now. Then, a second U-2 accidentally flies into Soviet airspace, almost starting an air battle. But the real heart-stopping moment, that was happening where nobody could see it, deep under the water.
Okay, I want you to really try and imagine this. You're on a Soviet submarine, the B-59. You're deep underwater. You've had zero contact with Moscow for days. You have no idea if the war has already started or not. The air conditioning is shot, so it is unbearably hot, and you can hear the pings of the US Navy hunting you from above. The pressure is just immense.
So the US Navy starts dropping these small practice depth charges. They're basically just trying to signal the sub like, hey, we see you, come to the surface. But inside that submarine, how could they know that? All they hear are explosions. The whole sub is shaking. To them, it feels like an attack. It feels like World War III has just begun.
The captain, Valentin Savitsky, he just snapped. He's cut off, he's convinced his country is being attacked, and he decides that's it. He screams, "We're going to blast them now." He believed war was happening, and he gave the order to prep their special weapon, a torpedo with a nuclear warhead.
Now, thankfully, Soviet protocol was really strict. You couldn't just launch a nuke. It needed a unanimous vote from the 3 senior officers. So, the captain, Savitsky, he said yes. The political officer on board, he also said yes. 2 out of 3. The fate of the entire world came down to one last vote. And that third vote belonged to a man named Vasily Arkhipov. So think about it. The captain is yelling, the political officer agrees. The whole crew is panicking. Would Arkhipov give that final order? Would he be the one to launch a nuclear torpedo, attack the US Navy, and kick off a chain reaction that would absolutely end the world?
He said no. Vasily Arkhipov said no. He calmed the captain down. He argued that maybe, just maybe, they weren't under attack, that the explosions were signals, and against all odds, he convinced him to surface. Think about that. The world wasn't saved by a president or a general, it was saved by one man's composure, deep inside a submarine.
That single act of saying no bought everyone time, and that's what they needed. Because back on the surface, both Kennedy and Khrushchev were absolutely shaken by how close they'd just come to total disaster. And they started working like crazy through secret channels to find some way, any way, to de-escalate this.
So here's the deal they struck. There was the public part, the part everyone heard about. The Soviets agreed to take their missiles out of Cuba. In return, the US promised it would never, ever invade Cuba. But there was a secret part, a part nobody knew about for decades. The US also agreed to quietly remove its own nuclear missiles from Turkey. That was the real key. It gave both sides a way to claim victory and, more importantly, to pull back from the edge.
So why does this still matter? Because the crisis was a massive wake-up call for the entire planet. It led directly to the famous hotline, the red phone, between the White House and the Kremlin so they could actually talk. It pushed them to sign the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. And it really hammered home this terrifying idea of mutually assured destruction. The simple fact that in a nuclear war, nobody wins, everybody loses. The lessons from those 13 days are still the foundation of our nuclear policy today.
You know, what the Cuban Missile Crisis really teaches us is that all our complex systems, all our strategies, they can fail. They can bring us right to the brink of total annihilation. And sometimes, everything comes down to a single moment of human judgment. In 1962, the world got lucky. One person had the courage to say no. It leaves you with a pretty sobering thought, doesn't it? Who's going to be there to say no next time?